when I'm mowing my lawn and I put that nice clean line between my yard and their yard, and my grass is cut short, and there's this little I sort of feel like I'm winning. I win.
You feel like you're a little better.
I won. I won right now. My yard is cut and yours is not. Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at, who's it aimed at, Brian?
Anyone who cares deeply about the
craft
and science of building homes.
Well, close. It was good. It's good for memory. For memory.
Maybe better? Was it a little better?
It was a little better. If you couldn't tell, you're listening to Justin Fink and Brian Pondolillo and Rob Yeagan.
Hello.
Last and certainly least. FHBpodcast@taunton.com is where you can send us notes, love notes, hate notes, suggestions for topics, questions. We love questions. Share your struggles in your project. Everybody's got the smartphone in their pocket. You run into a snag. You take a picture of it. You send us an email. That's it.
Or let's bring back those. Let's resurrect those video questions that we got once.
We like video.
More video questions.
We got twice.
We got two.
Yeah,
we like the video questions. Show us around.
Yeah.
Take us on a tour.
Take us on a tour. It takes up time in the show. We don't have to talk.
We can look at things. It's great.
Yep. FineHomebuilding.com/podcast is where you can go to see the show notes, watch a video stream of the podcast, and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
Any opening thoughts, gentlemen?
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation, and I think we've all experienced it. We've got a coworker who might be a little bit, I don't know how you would describe this, but particular.
What are we going to talk about here?
I don't know. I got a little nervous.
We'll get right there. Don't worry, because you experienced this a lot, Justin.
But
especially when you're doing lots of work on your house, you got remodeling projects, you got materials laying around the property.
Is this coworker you?
No. At what point do you feel that neighbors may be justified in intervening into what you got going on your projects?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, so when you're working, are you because you've done a lot of work on your house, you've got a lot of materials around, are you trying to be mindful of what your neighbors may think?
Let me ask you a question that gets to this.
Questions on questions.
Is
so it's good. Interview format.
What do you feel like the obligation is? Let's say that you live in a neighborhood, right? So you're not completely isolated from your views of your neighbors and they can see your house. What is your social obligation as a human in society for keeping your yard and property maintained? What is the level? What is the obligation? When do you cross the line? Can you ever cross the line?
Yeah, it's such a good question. My instinct is to want to have the attitude of it's my property, I can do whatever I want.
Exactly.
It's like I want to go there, and because in some ways there are certain things that I do want to. I want to be able to be that way about, and I want to allow people to be that way with it. Is their property, and you want to make it your home, whatever that means for you.
Yes.
Refrigerators in the front yard.
But it quickly changes. Like, put a fridge out front and leave it out there. And my attitude quickly changes to like, they shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's just a reflection. Like, I don't enjoy walking around the neighborhood and seeing crap in someone's front yard. So I don't think I would be the one to put a whole bunch of crap in my front yard. So it's like,
right.
I mean, there's stuff out there, but I try to keep it hidden, or I try to keep it tight and orderly, or just out of view. If I do have materials, if I got sheets of plywood or whatever it is.
But I mean, it creeps. Like it definitely
creeps around the corner
you might,
of the house.
Well, you might have like a pile of stuff that you're working on, and it's neat and tidy, and then maybe something knocks it over, or the tarp starts to tear, and it very quickly goes from like I'm going to take care of that within a week. Like I'm putting this here temporarily to like the grass has stopped growing there.
That's there now.
That's probably not going to be touched because I've moved on, and it's like human nature. It just starts to.
Now,
I haven't painted the doors on my shed. I primed everything. I put it together. It's the last little thing I've got to like fit, and it's just like every time I walk by it, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to do this. And the neighbors can see it from their house.
Do you think? Well, that's different. I mean, can they really tell if the shed doors aren't painted?
Yes. They're bare wood.
Oh, they're bare wood. But the whole shed is bare wood.
No, it's all painted.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, not the shed. Sorry, the lean-to off the garage.
Oh, the lean-to. Okay. you and your compound and all your structures.
Yeah, it is quite a compound.
Have you ever gone to a neighbor's house and asked them, because
I would never.
your neighbors have knocked on your door and said, hey,
I would never.
why don't you tidy up back here, right?
I would never.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever.
I can't even imagine what level it'd have to be at for me to intervene.
I wonder if it was immediately next door to me and it was getting out of hand, I'd probably say something.
What does out of hand mean? Who are you to decide what's out of hand?
I think it becomes very apparent what's out of hand.
Okay, what about they don't mow their lawn and they mow it twice a year? You like yours nice and tidy. You invest a lot of money into Scott's lawn care program.
I like a nice meadow.
To you, that is like my yard is my ego. It's like my
Self-worth.
yeah, like my beautiful pristine yard is what my forward-facing message to the world is. And this guy next door to you mows twice a year.
That wouldn't bother me.
I'm saying if it does, Rob,
I'll give.
I think maybe it's
shout
open
him
for
down. Everybody shout each
maybe
other
it's open
down.
for conversation. Maybe you could have a conversation with the guy.
Yeah.
Your views could be shared, and you come to a mutual agreement, like civilized human beings that cohabitate.
I asked my neighbors to do something about their dog.
Mm-hmm.
There was a line there because their dog would come to the edge of the property. If anyone was in our backyard, the dog would come to the edge of the property and bark incessantly for as long as we were in the backyard.
Yes.
It didn't matter how long, and they would leave the dog out where they left when they left all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And so we couldn't enjoy being in our own backyard. And that was a point where I was like, wait a minute, I'm gonna. I waited a while, but I said I'm gonna talk to them about this, and we had a nice conversation, and it was a little bit uncomfortable for a moment, but then they totally understood, and they rectified the situation.
And put the dog down.
Yeah, no, they locked the dog inside forever.
Good job,
now.
Good job, Brian.
But yeah, I think there's that. Is there? I don't know what the line is.
Yeah.
Is there? The question I was going to ask is what they're doing with their property impacting your ability to enjoy or live on your property? Sometimes people are actually open to a conversation. They
Sure.
might not even realize
Yeah.
that what they're doing is bothersome, and it might be a matter of like, okay, let me actually. I know I've waited 2 years to put those materials in the basement, but let me go ahead and do it so that I didn't know I was bothered.
I think it definitely becomes an issue because, all of us, we're just almost constantly remodeling our houses. There's always materials around.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I could understand they're building a deck and it'll be done and cleaned up in a couple of weeks.
Right.
It's like there's materials around.
I've had situations where like I was building a shed for somebody and the neighbor came and like screamed at me over the fence. I think I may have been working past dinner time. Like it was like a Saturday or something, and I don't know, it was maybe 6 or 7 at night. It's summer, it stays light out. And I think that was going on. He came over and screamed and said, you better have a permit for this. I'm calling the town. And like it was just there's a certain
interesting approach.
There's a certain personality where it's like if you alter or influence my life and my property at all, I'm gonna fight back.
But if you
I love the example of, hey man, I work nights and during the days when I sleep, so you got to keep it down. And I started to feel like, but do I? Like, I kind of get it, but also, when do you want me to do this?
I think there's a
And
conversation.
for some of these things, there's laws. Your town probably has a noise ordinance, and you're either within it or you're without.
And that's fine.
Right.
But even if there's shades of it, but it's like, hey man, I work at a bar and I don't get home until 2 a.m. every night, and you're making noise at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's like, well, it's too bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, but get a different job or put in earplugs. But you have to take responsibility for your half at some point.
Yeah.
I'm not posting a schedule of when I'm going to make a little noise.
You could let him know.
Getting everybody's approval.
Right.
You could let him know.
Let him know what?
What your what your working hours will be, how long you're going to be there, how long the job's going to take. Just let them know, like, listen, I'm hired to do a job. It's going to be loud for from 10 to 1. Till Friday.
People get pissed off about that when there's like a new house going up. Like these workers show up 8 a.m. every morning and they're working. It's like, yeah, they're working.
Yeah.
It's like it's not really about you.
Now, would you ever go and remedy the situation yourself? So in your scenario, would you ever go and mow that neighbor's lawn?
No. I feel like my dad would, but I wouldn't do that.
Would you go and move some doors? that
So-
were
so-
in your that were in your sight lines.
All right. So what is the actual
I'm just curious.
This is the story behind it. Is the doors.
We
so
don't have to. Really
so well, it's
name
fine.
names.
We don't have to name names, but what was the actual? How was it phrased? The displeasure of these doors. If you can explain, Brian.
Well, let's just we could keep it real simple. We say there's the one homeowner had a view of something in another person's property that they did not prefer,
Yes.
and decided to didn't end up following through with it, but attempted to actually go and remedy it themselves by moving it. Which, as you said, now is trespassing.
Yeah, that's
so
a
we've got a problem there with that.
Very simple.
But it could be a finer line than that, right? Because you could mow where two lawns join.
Yes.
You could kind of go a little further and mow
yeah.
it and just sort of get in there a little bit. I mean, I definitely take care of part of my neighbor's property. Right on the border, and there's this little spot, and it definitely has a connection to where my property is landscaped a little bit. I've just always done it. I've never asked. I just have done it. I'm sure they think it's great that I keep that part of their property looking
Good.
tidy.
Maybe. Or maybe they're like,
Or they're like, there's,
Maybe.
there goes Brian again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't.
Should we
say
call it? Should we call the town this time?
You
Nah.
can't say anything when you're illegally running a business out of your non-commercial zoned lot.
Oh.
You can't say much.
Yeah.
And we got a few of those.
I love this.
You got
I
a few
love
of
this.
those in the neighborhood.
Now we're getting into it.
Therefore, I feel like I got a little leverage.
I love that. Like, it's just waiting for them to complain. So you can be like, yeah, well, you do this.
You know what? Like, and that's
It's always
like,
a healthy
oh,
fight.
man, we are an interesting people, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
What if
I
they-
actually
what
feel
if-
like-
what if the guy came over? This is the guy who yelled at you about, I'm going to call the town on you. You got a permit.
He didn't. Oh, yeah. That
What
guy,
if he
okay.
popped over their fence and said, "Hey, man, Saturday, it's the weekend. It's like after 7 o'clock, trying to enjoy the evening with my family. You mind knocking off for the day?"
I'd be like, sure. I totally get it.
Well, I've told you guys how I.
Or I'd be like, hey, man, I totally hear you. I've got like 50. Can you give me 15 minutes to
Yeah.
wrap up what I'm working on?
But that wasn't
Does
the
that
approach.
work?
The approach was popping over and be like, "I'm going to call the town on you. You better have
No,
a permit."
and that's what most people switch to is like that's
like,
going to work.
Like
is,
the combative
Yeah.
argument.
Right.
And everybody just gets their back up and then
Yeah.
it goes
Hey,
nowhere.
that's how we roll, unfortunately.
I never have understood that. I don't approach things that way. But
Just talk to people.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
When I'm mowing my lawn and I put that nice clean line between my yard and their yard, and my grass is cut short, and there's
Do you
this
just,
little
like,
lot.
do you just drive, like,
I
with
sort
your-
of feel like
with
I'm
your hands
winning.
up?
I
You
win.
feel like you're a little better.
I won. I won right now. My yard is cut and yours is not.
I wait till 9:30 on Sundays to start up the lawnmower.
I don't
Any
really.
other day it would be 9.
I don't really have a problem.
I wait. I
Like,
wait on the weekends.
I'm
for
not.
Sure.
I'm not like at 9 a.m. watching the clock, going like I got to get out there. I'm usually still like, trying to open my eyes. So it's not. It's not really an issue for me. But I could see for early risers that would be annoying.
Yeah.
If you wake up at 5 a.m. naturally and you want to get started, you probably should know what the ordinance is in your town.
Yeah.
Ordinance.
Well, that was a surprising conversation.
That's what I like. How much time did we kill, Jeff?
You're welcome. Hey, you're welcome, guys.
We're about 12 minutes in. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Damn. Can you change the audio so that our voices move slower?
Yeah.
Yes. Just a little, not noticeable, like a one,
All right, Brian.
like a 0.75.
Getting squeezed a little bit today. My head's starting to hurt.
He's got some tight.
It's like it's gonna pop.
He's got a tight headset on. All right.
I noticed your head was looking a little bigger. So KJ wrote to us, I'm a new homeowner, and what, Rob?
Did we want to give the Brian an opportunity to address
No,
anything?
we don't.
Okay.
KJ
Let me
writes,
just say. Let me just say I'm sorry. Period.
Let's just.
Period. If you listen to the last episode and anything that I said,
well, now we got to do it.
that anything that I said was sounded insulting or dismissive, I was trying to articulate things that I was not doing a good job of, and I am sorry.
Okay, we can leave it at that. We don't have to
That's
rehash
it.
it. Go listen to the last episode if you want to know what the hell Brian is talking about, and then
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have ever met Brian, you would know that he is absolutely never really comes across bad like that. He doesn't
Like the
he doesn't have any
yes.
negative or
Yes.
or
I
in
think-
your face opinions about things.
I think the apology is unnecessary because we know
we know the intent.
the intent.
And
I
hopefully the
appreciate
audience
that,
knows
fellas.
the intent.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, we can move on.
Sometimes when you're on an hour-long show,
Things get a little rangy.
sometimes, yeah, it happens. Anyway, so KJ writes, I'm a new homeowner and learning to take on some of the DIY and maintenance issues that come along with buying a house. Right now, I'm focused on dealing with some rotten exterior trim, which seems fairly straightforward in terms of replacement. Pry it off, replace it, done. But the rot seems to extend to the bottom of the doorways, too. That seems more complicated, and I'm wondering, are those typically patch-in-place kind of jobs or tear out and replace? So it's an excellent question. I mean, if the skirt board of your house or like your window trim is rotted, and you can match it, often the solution is rip it off, put on a new piece with, prime the ends, put on the new piece, fasten it, putty the holes, reprime and paint it, and you might be good to go. But a doorway, which, by the way, is a very common place for rot to show up, is trickier. So what have you guys...
Is he talking about, when he says the doorways, is he talking about like the
jam?
I don't know.
jambs, the trim, the sill?
I don't know, so that's...
The door?
We could go, I need more information and move on, or we could just try to hit all of those options.
Well, I think like
Where, at what point do you replace the whole door versus a patch in place?
Well, I think like if the trim is rotten, like the end grain of the trim piece, if that had wicked up moisture, I mean, I think you could just replace the trim piece. Just
So
how
can
you
we
describe the skirt board.
Can we get ourselves oriented for anybody who's not familiar with the terminology? So the doorway, obviously the door. Everyone knows the door. That's
The door swings.
That's the slab. That
Or
part,
slides.
that part swings. The sill is the part along the bottom. It could be metal. It could be wood. Usually it's one of those two. The door jams are what the door latches into
And
and
they've got the
hinges
stops.
on. The stops are the little piece that it pushes, that it stops against.
Should be weather stripped.
Usually weather stripped for an exterior door. And then the casing or trim on the outside is the decorative part that covers the gap where the door meets the house.
Yes.
So I wanted to just make sure we have our terms straight so that everybody can follow what we're talking about. Because if it's the trim on the outside,
Just replace it.
I would just replace it. It's
Oh,
three
now-
pieces.
Just curious. Well, maybe I jumped in too soon. But if it's trim that had been applied,
Yeah.
yes, just like a window casing, you can pretty easily replace it. What about if it's brick mold? What if it comes already attached?
It's still just applied.
And you can buy that profile.
Yeah.
I've never worked with it in a situation like that.
Usually it's stapled on. If you get a pre-hung door that has exterior brick mold, which is the name of
casing.
the trim. Yeah, the type of trim.
Yeah.
That's just stapled onto the door.
So it's
And
still
you can-
easy enough to.
So you can pry that off, pull those staples out, and then retrim it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't try to. Don't assume that every brick mold looks the same because they don't. The profiles vary slightly, so it's not like, well, I can just replace this one leg and leave the top or whatever.
yeah.
If it's like a flat casing that's really simple, like a 1x4 or something, a lot of times for exterior trim, people will just make an upward angled cut at
For
the
a
bottom,
scarf?
like a scarf joint cut. And a cool trick for that, if you're going to do that, is to, on the miter saw, cut a scrap of wood at usually you do it at the steepest angle you can get. Like the steeper the scarf joint angle, the better a glue bond is
Yeah,
going
the
to
more
be.
surface area you have in the joint.
Exactly.
More
Like,
glue.
like a true scarf joint, the term, like from boat building or wherever it originated, was like a really long cut, like a foot long or more. But best we can do is probably on a miter saw is probably 60 degrees cut or something. So cut a scrap of wood there. Fasten it below, fasten it to the piece you're going to remove, like so to the rotted area. Let's say like 4 or 6 inches off the concrete stoop or wherever the rot was coming
That's
from.
where it's going to be rotten. So yeah.
And fasten it so it's nice and square, so that it's that the cut you're going to make is perpendicular to the edge of the trim, 90-degree angle, and you want the long point of that little mitered block you cut to be pressed against the trim. So you're kind of created this upward sloping guide. Then you can take a multi-tool or even a handsaw at that point if you got good enough clearance to the sides, and you just kind of press that tool down to that pre-cut block and use it as a guide to make a perfect angled cut up into the trim. Then you remove your little guide block, pry off the rotten trim, or pull it off, whatever.
Wipe it off.
Yeah, wipe it off. And then, address whatever situation's going on under there, cut a new piece at that same angle. The top is that same angle, prime it, slide it up in there, usually with a little bit of adhesive is a nice move. To a little bit of caulk will work. and then usually there's still a little bit of filling to do. It's often not a perfect fit. You might have a little bit of puttying to do at that little seam mark. Fasten it, as usual, and then paint and finish it. And that's a pretty good in-place patching technique.
Yep.
Often that's done at the bottom of windows. The bottom of corner boards is really popular. I mean, because if you think about a corner board, it's like I'm not going to replace 2 stories worth of trim when the bottom 6 inches are rotten.
Yeah.
So that's where that scarfing in a new piece works really well. But for brick mold, I would be tempted to. You have to worry about matching the profiles. I mean, because if you think about the steps of that, it's like I'm going to have to cut a piece off, go to the store, see if the one at the store matches that. If it doesn't, go to another store. Once I find one that matches, if I can, then I come back. Then I patch in that one piece. It's like you could just decide I'm replacing this trim this weekend, go to the store, buy brick mold. Doesn't matter what the slight variation of the profile is. Come back, rip out the old, put in the new, and you're done in one trip. So from like a remodeler's perspective, that's going to be what they do because it's the least amount of time involved.
So the width is typically the same. So it's
usually
going to
2
come to meet whatever your siding is.
Yeah.
But the profile might be different, so you wouldn't be able to match it up to a piece that's in place. But if you take it off and put new stuff on,
and
it
I mean,
should be good.
you might be able to, but it's a little bit of a
right.
It's not the kind of thing where you're going to go, I'm going to buy the brick mold, drive up to the house, or walk out of my front door and then go, let's get started with a patch, because you're going to find pretty quick it might not match up. So that's the trim. I mean, have you guys ever done anything different than that? I mean, it's pretty much patch in place or replace.
When it gets deeper than that,
I suppose you could, for some trims, you could stabilize and epoxy repair, especially if it's like a profiled trim, like a historic house, or like a fluted trim or something. You could. Mike can put up a link to this. Andy Engel did a great little short piece on the step-by-step of using epoxy for trim repair. But it's essentially remove the stuff that's punky and soft. Usually, like, if you can, we didn't really say this, but how do you know what's rotten enough?
You'll know.
I mean, usually I like to just take a screwdriver and stab it. And you can stab around the whole area until you find out where the screwdriver won't poke in. And that's kind of where you should stop your repair, maybe go a little farther than that. So remove all the loose stuff, squirt in some
hardener,
some of that, the wood hardener.
Is that an Abitron?
I think they make it. I've seen a Minwax makes it too. It's that little yellow can. It's like an old-fashioned oil can or something. Yeah. And if you have solid wood there, often they tell you to drill little holes to help it penetrate into the solid wood. So you squirt that in, stabilize it, and then you can mix up 2-part of putty, epoxy putty, pack it in there so that it's bigger than the shape, like a little bit bigger than you need, and then you can just trim it back with sandpaper and saws or whatever.
Our director Bob Goodfellow just did this on his project, but he used an epoxy. He's an old boat builder, so he used West Systems epoxy.
Yeah, he used an epoxy with some kind of a filler in it.
Yeah, and what he likes about it is that you could depending on how you mix it, you can manipulate the consistency, and so you could really pack it in there. But he says once it hardens, you could trim it like wood, like you could plane it.
Yeah,
like when you're fairing boat hulls and stuff like that, you could use wood planes on it. It'll just fine shavings. So
it's worth pointing out too that a lot of times, like on a windowsill, it can just take a real weathered beating, and it might not need to be replaced. Like the paint flaked off and it's cracked, and you can see the wood is starting to fail. In those cases, you can just mix up a really liquidy epoxy and just coat it on there and then repaint it. Like just kind of saturate the wood with watered down epoxy essentially, rather than ripping out and replacing. And you might need to do that on some trim or on the door sill too. What else? So
what about the rip it out and do it right kind of mentality? Okay, that sill is not.
Is it inherent in this discussion that you figure out why it rotted? I suppose that we should have mentioned that.
I mean,
don't just put another piece of wood in and have the same thing happen in 5 years or 2 years.
Right, and it may not. It may in these cases, especially with a door that comes down to the ground and is often touching the ground. it might not be that there's a major thing wrong. It might just be that it's end grain.
Yeah.
And maybe it wasn't primed.
Sure. Likely it wasn't,
Or
but
it
yeah.
wasn't primed well, but it's end grain and it's going to wick moisture and it's a likely place for rot eventually.
Yeah, never forget
if you have
that
wood in place
Houses
long
need to be
enough.
maintained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean sometimes and I would preach caution and not getting carried away with like, well, I mean this trim rotted. You know, my house was built in 1950 and now it's 2018 and this trim needs to be replaced. I think I should really just change this entire front facade and how it was weatherized, you know, to avoid this problem in the future, which cost me $27 to fix.
Right.
Like
Right.
maybe that $27 is just okay.
I love it I love the
Yeah.
old houses we have around here that have actually been kept up where there's been problems, but not redone. I love it. You see the corner, like every corner board, like you
Yeah.
said, has a scarf joint at the bottom. The paint, like you can see that it's been scraped over and over and over again, but it's been taken care of.
Those
You know?
are
I love seeing those
New
houses.
England sensibilities
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
it's great.
Well, yeah, because everybody jumps to like this shouldn't have happened. I want it fixed instead of like, well, you know, the tires in your car wear out,
Right.
And you know, batteries have to be changed and things.
And this stuff's been out in the weather.
yeah, it's like
Direct weather for
sometimes you have
100
to
years.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have to replace a piece, and it's just like a deck board. You didn't buy crappy deck boards; they just wear out,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's okay. That said, if it's
And that'll be true of plastics too, and composites.
plastics,
Don't think that it's just gonna.
yeah, you'll get fading. That'll be the
yeah.
thing that goes wrong
That
there.
that stuff moves like crazy. So
Yep.
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, UV degradation is going to be interesting with plastic. See what happens there.
UV dags. Yeah.
Wind-driven moisture. What'd you say?
UV degs.
We haven't talked about the jam though.
No.
What? And I actually don't know the answer to this. I've never had to deal with that.
You can do the same thing with the jam. You can cut in, what do they call it, a Dutchman or something? What is it term? I
Yeah, but a
always
Dutchman
forget.
is like if you have like a damaged section of floor. I don't know
Well,
how you would
could
do
it on-
that.
You can do it on a door too, like you know, if you want to move the latch strike or something, or you could do the same approach. You could cut in a new piece, scarf in a new piece.
I guess it's a very, it's just
It's
a
usually-
way of isolating the damage and just patching.
I sort of see that at, like I just said, you know, some things are maintenance items. That's like a sign of you didn't do the maintenance items. It's too far gone now.
Right.
And, you know, maybe the door can be saved if you love the door. Sometimes doors are expensive, but you might need to replace the jams. And some of the newer jams have a composite at the very bottom. It's composite trim
Right.
That's right.
joined into an otherwise wood jam, and that'll save you some hassle later.
Yep.
But in those cases, there's an art form to removing jams and sills. If the sill is attached, you have to take that out too. If it's sometimes in an old house,
At
it's
that point,
separate.
are you replacing the door though? Like
Sometimes.
say your sill's shot and your jams are shot.
Sometimes.
You could save the slab, right? You were saying.
Sometimes. Yeah.
What were you saying?
Sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes you want to just replace the door because it's shot and
Right.
the jams
That's
are fine.
often the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to a painter recently he's got a great house near the offices here, and we were checking it out recently as a potential shoot location. And it was built like in the 90s, but it's an old salt box style, and it looks like it's 100 years old. And he's got this great, beautiful wood door, and he said, no matter what you do, those solid wood doors are going to warp. They're going to move. He's like, he's you know, he paints behind the hinges, 3 coats, gets the bottom of the door, and he's like, there's just. Like you were saying, it's just exposure, and it's just going to move and wear out.
Well, it's like that's the trade-off. You want a beautiful wood door, and it's
Yeah.
you can't expect it to act like a fiberglass door. It's going to wear out.
Right.
It's remarkable. The front door on my house is, you know, it's ranch style house, so the top of the front door is right underneath the eave, and the bottom is much more exposed to the weather, and it's amazing to watch the door weather. The top stays perfectly fine. The bottom needs maintenance every year.
I think one of the worst things that people can do on a house is to leave out the overhangs. It's like
They do so much.
they do so much.
They keep your basement dry. They keep your
Yeah.
doors and windows dry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like when we got into that land of kind of trying to build quickly and cheaply, it was like one of the first things to go. You know,
Yeah,
especially
but I think it's also. I mean, I think capes don't have overhangs. Bungalows
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
monsters. So it's
That's
those,
true.
those architectural styles. I think just informed some of those decisions.
And now it's popular with more modern styles to not have overhangs.
yeah, just super crisp, clean.
Yeah.
So anyway, the jams. I I've developed my jam technique over many years of doing these different ways. I used to try to cut the sill out at the bottom, to rip that out and then kind of pull the sides off and then the top down. But it can be tough to cut a sill in half without, cut it in half effectively and fast without getting into a situation where you might damage the floor inside the house. Because, you take your reciprocating saw, you're cutting from the outside, and that thing has a stroke length. It might move 1.25 inches during its back and forth travel, and it's hard to place that perfectly so that you're making an accurate cut on only the jam but not hitting the tile or the wood or whatever inside. So I just avoid the sill completely at this point, and I just cut the jam in half, somewhere around the middle point on both sides of the door, and I do it could be an upward or a downward cut, an angled cut, so that you can, if you cut straight in, then when you try and pull those pieces out, they bind on each other. Yeah. So if you cut either up or down, you can remove one and then the other. And you move it as like a 3-piece section, both the top and bottom, like side in, pull the top down, and then bottom side in, pull the sill up.
Gotcha.
And then you can, to your point, Rob, you can then go in and add a lot of weatherproofing. I mean, a little bit of proper flashing goes a long way. Mm-hmm. That I don't see as overkill. If you're going to replace a door,
I
would take the
that's
opportunity.
the time to do it.
It's low-hanging fruit at that point. Yeah. But I wouldn't feel the need to replace everything just to add that flashing.
Right.
If it appeared to me to just be a maintenance thing. Mm-hmm. I know other people would be like, the Mike Holmes approach.
What a hack.
This
Justin
entire
Fink is.
Side of the house needs to be rebuilt.
Yeah. Jack the foundation.
Jack the foundation, yeah. Are
we doing Aaron?
We got a lot out of that question. I'm surprised. I didn't expect that. Oh.
I like when Justin surprises himself.
Yeah. Good job, Justin. Aaron writes, we're currently working on a wraparound porch for our RV tiny house in sunny southwestern New Mexico. The porch is minimal but robust with 6x6 and 6x8 rough sawn cedar attached with Simpson Strong Tie Outdoor Accents hardware. This was a little separate note. Aaron told us that he heard about the Outdoor Accents hardware through our channels. Anybody who hasn't checked that out, it's a really cool, you probably know Simpson Strong Tie. They make joist hangers and every other piece of metal hardware. So this is a line of black finished hardware that looks a little more decorative, and it has these little faux bolts. They drive like long structural screws, but their heads of them look like a hex bolt.
Yeah.
So they're really cool looking, and they're still structural. Anyway, so 2x6 cedar rafters with metal roofing, 1x4 cedar purlins.
Simpson's a smart company.
Yeah. It took them a while to get that decorative thing happening.
Oh, sure. But it's brilliant because they've put so much effort into developing helpful fasteners and helpful hardware. Yeah. And then they come up with that. It's like, yes.
And coming up with codes to give them a reason to buy them.
Okay.
So the big point here for Aaron is that all the framing is going to be exposed from the underside.
Right.
So you're going to be looking up at the structure from underneath. So his question is, he can attach all of those common rafters right to the house, or his little tiny house, with common hardware. But he's wondering, what do you do when attaching the king, the hip, and the jack rafters, which are, the hip rafters are going to be the corners.
The corners of the porch roof.
One idea he said is to use a heavy-duty Craig pocket hole jig, which would accommodate Simpson Strong Tie's heavy-duty structural screws. But he can't find any examples of anybody having done that. And he's wondering, if not that, what other attachment method might be typical for a porch with this kind of exposed framing and hardware and everything.
I'm really interested where he's going to attach, how this is all going to...
Me too.
How this is all going to connect to the house, but that's another.
Yeah, there's not a very big fascia or
there isn't a fascia. Well, I guess there is.
Well, there is. But,
yeah, but anyway,
so we don't actually have the porch. We just have a picture of the house, and we can see the slab, and we can see where the
posts are going.
The posts, the post hardware is already in the slab, so we know where those are going to go. We do not, however, know how it's going to attach. But the question remains. I mean, you can picture in your head.
Yes.
he's going to use some sort of a sloped hanger probably to attach those angled rafters to the side of the house. So how do you attach the one in the corner that's coming off at an angle? I mean, you can get an angle.
The hip rafter.
You can get an adjustable sloped hanger. You know, they make them that are on an angle too, like a skewed hanger.
But I think he's talking about the jack rafters, right, that are dying into that.
Oh, I see.
You know what I'm saying?
He's talking about the rafters that are dying into the hip rafter.
Yeah. And I honestly have not seen.
Honestly, nails.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall if I've seen.
I'm not even sure you need to have hardware there. I've
Really
never seen anybody put hardware there.
Kind of detail, and I literally can't think of a project I've been on where I've seen.
I see what
he's
saying though. And first of all, when I got this question, I had no idea that Craig even made a heavy duty pocket hole jig.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up, and they
do.
Sure enough, they got one.
Really?
It's not new. It's made for like if you're doing bigger stuff like 2x4s. And it's just a slightly bigger hole.
When you're doing a timber frame, you know?
Yeah.
Where would these pocket holes go, though?
I think he would just hide them on whatever side would not be visible. But
or he just thought maybe it was a cleaner attachment method, like you would see them, but at least it was kind of tucked in.
I would just use screws. And, you know, my stance on this is that if you're orderly with your screw placement, you know, you take the time to draw a line and mark top and bottom, you know, offsets of where they're going to sit. Screws look pretty good if you put them in an intentional patterned way.
Yeah.
So
like face nailed decking on porches,
it looks
like
awesome.
stainless steel and like everything is perfect. It actually looks awesome. Yeah, you're right.
So I mean, that would be you don't need a piece of hardware here unless I'm missing something. So I would just use fasteners.
Fasten them with fasteners. Recommendation by Justin Fink.
Well, as opposed to a piece of hardware.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate comment, Rob.
I know. I'm with you.
All right. Jeff writes, Jeff, is this from you?
No, I don't think so.
Another Jeff writes.
Jeff would like to replace his existing fireplace mantel shelf with a fireplace surround.
It does almost look like mine.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to answer yours too, or find out what you did. So the issue lies in the bricks protruding out from the fireplace and how to build the surround around them while making it look good. So he said he's not looking to grind the bricks away, as that would cause a huge mess and issues with upper management, a.k.a. the wife.
I've got a big problem with that comment, but go ahead.
My thought is to build the surround around the protruding bricks, but not sure how it would look. I also need to keep in mind the existing fire code of at least 12 inches between opening and combustible materials. Learned this from one of your podcasts. I'd recommend just forgetting about that. Any thought on how to tackle this? I hope I included enough details for Brian. Actually, Jeff, that last comment should be attributed to Rob. Rob is the one who needs all the details. Brian doesn't care. This might be hard to imagine what we're looking at here, but it's like a little stack of, is it 3 bricks? I'm not looking at the picture, but they're corbelled.
They make a corbel.
So it's like the face of a brick fireplace surround, and there's these, on either side, there's 3 corbelled bricks that are supporting a shelf. They stick out as like a little shelf bracket kind of a deal.
Yeah, they're kind of supporting it.
And to be a little more clear about that, because before we had these photos,
They may have intended to
I was
support it.
confused. It's only 3 bricks. It's not running the length of. It's not 3 courses.
No.
It's 3 bricks. It's making what looks like little brackets.
But this is like it's also
out.
a fireplace that the brickwork doesn't run up through the ceiling. There's kind of a shelf. This was actually similar to what I faced in my living room.
Did you have these?
I didn't have the corbels, but I had just a brick kind of fireplace surround that was capped with a shelf and then drywall above it in plane with the rest of the wall. You know what I mean?
And the corbels, the bottom of the corbel is low enough that it's not like you couldn't cover them and still be within
the
combustible clearances. Yeah. So I think the only option here is really to get them out of there.
Yeah.
Either celebrate it and live with it, put a shelf on top of them and incorporate that, or you got to get them out.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of clearance because you could put a big kind of freeze board over. I mean, if you knock those corbels down, you could probably cover most of them with a freeze board and still be. You might be.
I mean, if you did like a 3/4 inch freeze board, like really flat, really low profile, because that low profile allows you to get closer to the firebox.
Yeah, and cover them. And removing. I know that why I said I take issue with it is like it's not a monumental task to like knock those corbels out.
No, it's not even dusty really. It's you could just take a brick chisel and hit it. I mean, those bricks are like almost designed
to break
where you want them to break. You might have to do a little bit of chisel work to get it flat in that area after you break them off, but that's not actually a big deal.
Right.
And then look up a couple issues back. We did a nice fireplace mantle that has that wide freezeboard detail that you could use.
Yeah. I would do that.
Yeah. Okay.
They got to go.
Gotta go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sometimes you got to fight with upper management. Hey, Rob.
That's right. Sometimes you got to. Oh, Brian. That's
All
funny.
right, that's gonna wrap us up. If you guys have questions or topics you'd like to hear on an upcoming show, shoot us an email. FHB podcast at taunton.com. Also, if you like the show, give us a rating and a review on iTunes or whatever app you're listening to the show through. Tell a friend. That is how we spread the word about this thing, and we give it all to you for free, so it helps us if we get our audience numbers up so we can help pay the bills. Anyway, so until next time, this is Justin for Brian and Rob and Jeff. Thank you, Craft Alive, and happy building.